Welcome everyone. Welcome to our Caregiver Vaping and Cannabis session for the Waterloo Regional District School Board. We're so honored and pleased that you've chosen to come inside on this beautiful weather day to join us and learn a little bit more about vaping and cannabis. My name is Jane Schultz-Jansen.
And I'm Heather Berry, and we are the Safe and Healthy Schools Consultants at the WRDSB.
The format for this evening is as follows. The informational part of the session will run from 7 till about 8:10, and a question and answer time will follow immediately after to allow you to ask the panel of presenters for clarification or to give you space to ask your own spontaneous questions. Our presenters will also explain an online option for you to send in your questions should you prefer to remain anonymous or wish to ask something in the midst of the presentation without interrupting it. Before we introduce you to our keynote presenters for the evening, please join me in a territory acknowledgement. In a moment, you will see some beautiful artwork. The artwork is one of many creations of Monique Bedard, better known as Mo Thunder. Mo is a binary, fluid, neurodivergent, multidisciplinary artist and facilitator who grew up in a small town along the St. Clair River. Currently, they live in Toronto, which has been home for over a decade. Mo's family is Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and French Canadian. Regarding this particular painting, Mo writes, "Inspiration comes from everywhere in nature. For me, its stories bring me memories and intergenerational healing individually and collectively. This painting is birthed from a memory of cultivating a garden on the land of my family, specifically my mother." Mo's message to us is, live from the heart with a good mind. Walk on the land with love and share respect alongside all nations, relations, and kin. Harvest only what you need. Now maybe you're like me and you enjoy being connected to the land through the act of gardening. Or maybe you enjoy canning and preserving the fresh produce grown in someone else's garden. Regardless of your connection to land or gardening, let's take a moment to reflect on all of the seeds planted in gardens over the past summer and fall seasons. Remembering to pause and give thanks every morning before anything else, acknowledging creation, that it surrounds us and is within us. And as Mo Thunder says, it cannot be ignored as creation truly sustains us. It is with this in mind that we acknowledge that the land on which the WRDSB sites are situated are the lands traditionally used by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Shinantan people. We also recognize the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. We are all treaty people with the responsibility to honor our relations.
Thanks, Jane. So it is our pleasure to introduce our three keynote speakers for this evening's presentation, and I'll introduce Ruth Cordukes, and she is joining us from Public Health. Thank you for the light. Although she hails from a small town outside of Ottawa, she has been a public health nurse with the region of Waterloo for 29 years. She started her work life at 14 as a candy striper, that's a youth volunteer, at the Queensway Carleton Hospital, serving coffee and treats. She's worked with youth or has had a youth focus throughout her entire career, including time working with pregnant youth at Monica House or Roof. And currently Ruth serves as the lead for cannabis, tobacco, and vaping prevention for the health unit, and we are so lucky to be able to work alongside her. A fun fact about Ruth is that she's going on a golden retriever puppy maternity leave in June.
Gwen Lee Fong is presently serving as our mental health lead for the Waterloo Regional District School Board. She's over here. Previous to this position, she served for 14 years, first as a clinical social worker with the school board for both elementary and secondary panels. Gwen also comes to us with experience as an equity and inclusion officer for 2 terms with our board. Gwen is the proud mom of 3 boys, 1 in high school, 1 in middle school, and 1 is a kindy student. She's also a proud baseball mom.
Carolyn Dudzinski is from Waterloo, where she attended St. David's Secondary School. After graduating with her nursing qualifications in 2018, Caroline worked in acute care at Grand River Hospital and then Huron-Perth Public Health in Stratford. Before beginning her present work with the region of Waterloo Public Health, she also has worked outside painting. She enjoys painting. She forages for mushrooms and in Halliburton, and she really enjoys swimming. So we thank you so much for being here, all 3 of you tonight.
Ruth, Gwen, and Carolyn, we look forward to the insight you will share with us this evening. So please join me in welcoming our guest presenters. Ruth, Gwen, and Carolyn, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you so much for coming out, and welcome to anyone who's joining us virtually. So I wanted to start by just making a comment about when we talk about substance use with parents, it can be really easy for parents to feel guilty or to feel bad or to feel like they're a failure. And that's not how we want you to feel. Because the choices that your youth makes when it comes to substance use, you don't have any control over. So it's irrational to put that as a marker for your parenting ability. Instead, I just want you, as we're talking about some of these things, for anyone, it might not be anyone here, but in case there is anyone here who's working with a youth who's currently struggling, or you know of some stories that are a little concerning, just think about what you do have control over. So things like you have control over the quality of conversations that you have. And Gwen is going to talk about that tonight, our social worker, and she's fabulous. The importance of having good quality conversations and how to have them. You stay connected with your youth. That's a sign of good parenting. You're there when they fall down. You're there when they need you. You're able to be there wherever they're at in substance use. Maybe your youth is like, no, I'm not interested at all, but I'd like to know some things about it. Maybe you have a youth who's I'd like to try something. Maybe you have a youth who is using, but it's not causing any problems to them. Maybe you have a youth who's starting to use heavily and it's starting to show some negative effects in their life. And maybe you have a youth who's like, you know what, I'd like to actually quit. So there can be all kinds of ranges of substance use that youth can get involved in, and it's meeting them where they're at. I told the group last week about a story that my dad, an expression my dad had. So my dad was born in 1924, and he grew up during the Depression, and he served during the Second World War. And so he said to me, does it really matter how many battles you lose if you win the war? So if you think about Second World War, 7 years long, right? There was a lot of battles that they lost along the way. But in the end, it turned out okay. There might have been some battle scars, there might have been some tough times, but it can turn out okay in the end. And adolescents can feel like that. Adolescence is a long time. It's not until they're 25 or 26 that their brain finishes developing. And so it can feel like you are in the trenches, and it can be easy to think, this is not going well. This is really not going well. This is definitely not going to turn out okay. And so that's when we just want you, take a step back, remember, take the long view. youth can make choices that you don't agree with, but if you're staying connected, you're having good quality conversations, you just stay in there for the duration, for the long haul, then things can turn out okay in the end. I'm just going to get Caroline to come on up and advance the slides. I just can't see what's on the screen. Okay. So the Waterloo Region District School Board is very supportive of us, and we're very grateful for their help. And there's lots of things that are going on when it comes to cannabis, tobacco, and vaping. And we have, lovely. On the table, you can see we've got some kits. These are cannabis and vaping kits. These are kits that are designed for teachers in grades 7 to 12. There's a variety of activities and PowerPoint slides that teachers can choose from. They're also available to see the electronic format on our regional website. We're in the process of updating those kits, and the new content includes things about cannabis edibles, some new videos, and cessation content for vaping and cannabis. So those revisions are going out by the end of this year, so we're excited about that. Every high school will have a kit, and every elementary school will have a kit. We also wanted to let you know that we've heard that we need to go younger. So we're in the process of developing a kit for grade 6 students on cannabis and vaping, and that's coming in the fall of this year. We were able to train grade 7 teachers in the fall of 2022 around the kits. In the past, we've trained grade 9 teachers. We've done a lot of training. Again, thank you to our board partners. And in the fall, we're hoping to be able to train grade 6 teachers. So just so you know that substance use is a community concern, and you've got partners that are here with you. Okay, next slide. Sorry. We've also been able to purchase some cannabis goggles kits for the schools, and these kits are fantastic if you have youth who are around driving age. Because what it is they put on these goggles that kind of replicate what it might be like to use cannabis, how it affects your perceptions. And then we have them do things, so they experience it. So they'll try and catch a ball while wearing these goggles. They'll try to do mazes. There's some fabulous ones where they're watching, it's as if they're driving a car, and they have to indicate when they would put the brakes on, or they have to indicate if they see a car or a truck or another vehicle. And it's a way, again, for them to see, oh, cannabis might affect my abilities, my sense of perception, my short-term memory. So, and it's fun. It's a fun way to learn. So those are available to be signed out through the board. Next slide. In the fall of 2023, we're also hoping to recruit youth in grades 9 to 12 as volunteers to provide messaging to their peers around cannabis and vaping, because as we know, youth know a lot. They know what's really going on the ground. They know more than we do. They know the reality, and they're in the best position to provide information and encouragement and support to their peers. So we're hoping to do that in the fall. They'll be using materials that were developed by over 16 different health units. They were focus tested by youth, and so we're hoping that they will find those resources helpful. There's prizes like pop sockets and laptop stickers and locker mirrors, and youth can also create their own messages as well. This is a video that's in the vaping kit that we thought we would show you. It's important to talk about smoking versus vaping, because the message is out there that it is safer to vape than it is to smoke. And that's absolutely true, but it's not a green light to vape. Our message is, if you're not already a smoker, don't start vaping. It's not to demonize vaping, but it's just, that's what we would recommend. It's not saying you have to do that. So we play this video to have a discussion. Oh, if you could play it for me, thanks.
How much do you know? Let's see the people. Vaping devices come in all shapes and sizes. Most consist of a battery, a heating element, a tank or reservoir, and a mouthpiece. The vaping liquid in the reservoir contains a solvent like propylene glycol and or glycerol, and flavors consisting of cannabinoids. Many also contain varying levels of nicotine, the same highly addictive substance found in cigarettes. Vaping products do not contain tobacco and do not involve burning or producing smoke. Vaping devices work by heating vaping liquid to form an aerosol that is inhaled through the user's mouth and lungs, where it is absorbed into the bloodstream. Vaping is less harmful than smoking. However, that doesn't mean it is without risks. Vaping is not intended for youth and non-smokers. Take a closer look. Visit canada.ca/vaping. A message from the Government of Canada.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And I've neglected to mention something that's really important. You'll notice at the very top it says www.menti.com, and then there's a number, a code. So if you'd like, you can log on to using your cell phone. If you brought your phone with you or you've got an iPad, you can go to menti.com, and there's an option for you at the very bottom. There's some emojis. I'd like to highlight two of them. One is a question mark, so if you want to get our attention when the lights are down, you can put a question mark, and that lets us know that you want to ask a question. If you would like to be anonymous, there's an option for you to actually just type your question in. It's also nice for anyone who's watching virtually. Okay, so we're going to have that code up through all the slides. So any questions at all about that? Does that make sense? Okay. We're going to have an opportunity for you to, if you'd like to participate in a few minutes. Okay, so as well here, there's the QR code if anyone's having trouble getting into menti.com that you can use. So when it comes to vaping, one of the things I'm asked a lot is, how do I know if my youth is vaping? And this discussion is not meant to turn you into vaping detectives. All it is a discussion of things to watch for. And things that you watch for lead you then to have a conversation with your youth. It's not about, confronting them with the evidence, interrogation. That's not it at all. It's just like any issue that you would have with your child. If you're able to know what's going on in their life, then you can have an influence. So signs of vaping. Equipment. So we've got a couple of trays here that have different types of vapes. These vapes were purchased locally in the last 2 weeks. I can tell you that one, a very slim purple one, it's disposable and it has 500 puffs. It's sold for $10. There's another one, the Flavor Beast. It's also a disposable. It's sold for $30 with, I want to make sure I get this right, 4,000 puffs. So what I've heard and what I've been hearing is that disposable are the most popular vapes around right now. Part of the problem is with the ones that are refillable is they leak over time. And if youth are trying to perhaps not be open about what they're doing, then having leaky vapes is a disadvantage. So look for vaping equipment. One easy way to feel comfortable about vaping is to go to a vape store. They're everywhere, and just check it out. And maybe go once a year, once every 6 months, because the products are always changing. And when you walk in, you'll very quickly get a sense of, oh, okay. Oh, what are pods? What's the juice? Then you can ask lots of questions. So if you notice that there's a lot of packages showing up that seem to be unusual. So it could be in the mail, it could be a package in a brown paper bag delivered that looks like a food delivery. It could be something with a Canada Post sticker on it. If it's unusual, you could ask your youth about that. If you notice that your youth is borrowing a lot more money than normally, from friends, from family members, and they don't seem to have a really reasonable reason for it, that could be a red flag. Doesn't mean they're vaping, but it could be something else that's troubling them, that's upsetting them. If you notice that on your credit card you're getting a lot of purchases charged that are kind of strange, you don't recognize the name of the company, that could be a red flag. Or if you notice that their banking card, they're spending a lot of money, and again, you don't recognize where some of the transactions are. It's just a red flag for you to have a conversation. As well, the chemicals in the e-juice can sometimes cause youth to have a dry nose and throat, and so they sometimes have nosebleeds and they're a bit more thirsty. You might see that, but you might not. Okay. Oh. There we go. For some youth, they develop a sensitivity to caffeine, so they end up using caffeine less. But Some youth love caffeine, so that might not be an issue. It's like, oh, I can feel it more. So again, it's not that you're necessarily going to see this, or you're going to see all these things. It's just what you might see. Just like symptoms for a cold. You don't always get all the symptoms for a cold, but you might get some. On their social media accounts and on their phones, if they have them, if you see lingo that you don't recognize, Google it, figure out what it is, because the lingo is changing all the time. And again, it might not be vaping, it might be something else, but it could be concerning. Take a look at who they're following on social media. There are a lot of influencers that are promoting vaping, or youth love to take pictures of themselves and videos and post them, as we know, and so they will do that of themselves vaping. So that would be another sign. It's also possible that they're vaping cannabis. And although you may not be able to smell cannabis if they're vaping cannabis, there are some telltale signs like the bloodshot eyes, increased appetite. If they're vaping cannabis a lot, using cannabis a lot, you might notice a change in their behavior where they're not doing the things they love to do. They're spending a lot of time alone. They're not going out with their friends. They're not doing their hobbies. And that's because cannabis may be taking up a lot of their time and a lot of their life. Okay, so if you'd like to try thementi.com, if you go to the Menti, you can enter your answer in terms of why do you think youth are vaping? What are some of your thoughts on that? And if you'd rather not enter, you can put your hand up. We can go old school too. Absolutely. To fit in is one of the number one reasons. There's research now that shows that peer selection may be more influential in terms of substance abuse and use than peer pressure. So who you actually hang out with. Oh, they're going, peer pressure right there. Curiosity is one of the number one reasons. And if they walk into a place where someone's been vaping and it smells so good, right? Those flavors, they're so intense. Yeah, common at school, right? So there's opportunity and they're seeing it. Oh, by the way, I meant to mention about the smells. If you walk into a room and you smell something really sweet, a really strong scent, it could very well be a vape, because with candy, you have to get really up close to a package of candy to be able to smell it. Same thing with a drink, but if someone's been vaping and a sweet smell, like it's quite strong. Okay, I think that's it. Anything else that anyone wanted to add? Yes. Yes, experience anxiety. That's an excellent comment. So youth will use substances sometimes to help with depression, with anxiety, with sleep, or with pain. And if that happens, what we say is, please talk to your youth about that. Encourage them to talk to a healthcare provider about that, about alternatives, because it's so easy just to take a puff of something or to take a gummy, right? It's right there. When it comes to developing positive coping skills, which Gwen is going to be talking about, it's a road that you almost have to walk with them, because youth can have very little hope or faith in a coping skill because it takes work and they haven't experienced it. But if you walk with them, help them experience how fabulous it feels to do yoga, how fabulous you feel after you've done a meditation that you like, you know, not some goofy one, but one that's designed for youth, then they've experienced it. And then it's like, oh, okay. But it's unfair to expect youth to give up substances when they're using them because it feels good, right? They like it, or they're using it to cope, if we don't give them something else positive to use instead. And when youth use substances for a long period of time, they run the risk of not developing those positive coping skills, and then you have youth who are entering adulthood at a disadvantage. Right? Because then at school, university, or college, or in the trades, or on a job, right, you're going to need those coping skills. And you can't be impaired on a workplace. Well, you shouldn't be. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Sorry, and I'm just going to go back to the other slide. I apologize for just a sec. Youth continue to vape, often because of the nicotine, because it's so addictive. And I'm going to show you a video that explains that. And the nicotine, once it's addictive, youth will continue to vape, not necessarily because it feels good, but just so they don't feel bad. It's a very similar to experience to what you have with smoking. After a while, like when you first start smoking, it feels fabulous. You'll get a rush, you'll get a buzz, mild euphoria. That's what the nicotine does. But then after a while, it's like, I'm going through withdrawal, I'm having cravings, and when you take the nicotine, it's not giving you that fabulous feeling, but at least you don't feel bad. That's the power of nicotine. Okay, thank you. The next one, please. Okay, so the other, yeah. Oh, you're just moving your glasses, sorry. I'm on the alert for a hand. Okay, so some of the other reasons why youth use substances is they do this calculation in their head. Either they underestimate the risks, or they figure the risks aren't going to hurt me. I'm going to be the exception to the rule. It's just not going to be me. And that's part of adolescence. Part of that confidence they need in order to learn and to take risks and to grow. So it's a good thing, but they haven't got the brakes on. The last part of the brain to develop in the prefrontal cortex is the thinking, planning, judgment that says, whoa, hold on a second. So as parents, that's where you can really help youth when you have discussions about substances. Okay, next slide, please. So this is just a video about nicotine that we have in the vaping kits, if you wouldn't mind playing that, please.
By habitual smoking, the body doesn't have much of a chance to function properly.
Most of us have heard all about smoking and nicotine and how addictive it is. There's nothing new about that. But what about vaping? I was curious, so I did a bit of digging. First off, yes, most vaping products do contain nicotine. In fact, they can deliver as much or even more nicotine than a cigarette. So what does that do? Well, nicotine increases the release of dopamine, and dopamine can make you feel good at first, but that doesn't last long. I'm just going to focus. Nicotine works in the brain by interfering with the normal functioning of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. If you keep vaping, you actually build up a tolerance to nicotine, which is not a good thing, because you need more and more nicotine to get those good feelings back, and for your brain to work normally.
So the evil cycle goes on and on.
At the same time, nicotine itself causes your heart rate and blood pressure to rise, which adds stress to your body. So vaping to reduce stress doesn't really work. Not for long, at least. So, vaping nicotine can actually harm your developing brain. Yeah. As teenagers, our brains are changing and growing so fast that we're at much higher risk for some long-lasting effects of nicotine. It can take less nicotine to get hooked on than adults. It can mess with your memory and concentration, and it can contribute to mood disorders. So, let's talk about addiction. We know that nicotine is very addictive. It can cause a physical dependence, so you feel more agitated or anxious if you haven't had it in a while, even after just a few hours without it, which adds even more stress to your life. Things like dizziness and shakiness, headaches, anxiety and irritability, difficulty concentrating and sleeping, increased appetite, feeling down, and of course, cravings for more nicotine. What it all comes down to is, once you start vaping, it can be really hard to quit.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so what youth need to know about vaping. And this is in the perspective of to help them make informed decision making. This is not about thou shalt, because those conversations don't go very well. Right? This is about, as a parent, feeling good knowing my child was aware of this when they made these choices. Trauma happens when you go, I would never have done that had I known this might have happened. So you're preventing trauma and you're helping youth have informed decision making. When you can approach it that way, as opposed to, I'm going to control the outcome, then youth can hear it. Because I don't like to feel like I'm controlled, and youth are no different, right? So one thing that can help is just, how would I react if someone said that to me? Would it work with me? If not, it probably won't work with your youth either. And I say that with a lot of compassion for you because the stakes are high, right? You're concerned about your youth. It's not that you're trying to be terribly controlling. It's just that you can see around corners and they can't. You know, you've got life experience. So you can have a powerful impact on your youth, whether they tell you that or not, they're listening, they are paying attention. Even if they don't say, oh, Dad, Mom, that's a really good point, right? It's there, it's in their brain, and it's a file they can pull on because they care what you think. Okay, so vaping exposes youth to harmful chemicals, including nicotine. Those who vape are more likely to go on and smoke cigarettes because they want to transition to a higher hit, a higher buzz. Nicotine is quickly addictive, and it leads to cravings, tolerance, and withdrawal symptoms, and it can harm your brain. Okay. So, delivering those messages, again, it's as parents, Gwen's going to talk about this, it's a challenge, but we know you deliver all kinds of challenging messages. Okay. They need to know that it can cause lung damage. We may not know fully what the long-term risks are, but we know a few things. And common sense tells us that inhaling chemicals can't be good for your body, right? And when we talk about the damage to a body, it all varies, right? There's a big difference between a youth who occasionally vapes and some who's vaping 3 or 4 pods a day, right? Just like there's a difference between someone who occasionally has a glass of wine and someone who's having a bottle of wine a day. So the more often someone uses substances and the higher amount they use and the stronger the amount, then the higher the risk. So we don't want to turn this into a blanket, oh my gosh, right? It's not black and white. So we can say that nothing good comes from vaping. It doesn't help, it doesn't heal your body, it doesn't cause any great benefits. Youth will say that it helps them cope, and you can see there's some disagreement about the nicotine on that. But for sure there are other ways to cope that are much healthier for their body. So anyone that is not a current smoker of cigarettes should not vape. And point out to them that the money that they're using could be used for vaping, could be used on other things, especially when they're only vaping not to feel bad. How good would it feel to not be in that vicious cycle, to not feel like you're a prisoner of nicotine, a prisoner of vaping, or a prisoner of cannabis, and you choose, right? And you can spend the money elsewhere. That can be a powerful incentive, because consequences and incentives work with youth. Okay, I'm just going to skip, I'm going to skip this video. It's just a short one, but it's in the kit. You can find it on our website. Please go to the next one. Yeah. That being said, of course, there are youth who have every intention of continuing to vape. This is where I go back to meeting youth to where they're at. So if they're going to keep vaping, then this is the harm reduction piece. Encourage them to avoid nicotine if they can, avoid vaping daily, cut down on how often they're vaping. For sure, avoid homemade e-juice. Sometimes they'll add nicotine salts to the juice to up the nicotine content. Avoid e-juice that contains THC. And to keep the pods, any paraphernalia relating to vaping, lock it up. Keep it away from children and pets. Nicotine in particular is poisonous to children and animals, poisonous to humans, and there's small little bodies that it can be fatal. And all that being said, I said this at the last presentation, there may be some parents who are like, you know what, if my child was just using cannabis, that would be a good day. Really. And that may be the case. So the perspective is, for some youth, just vaping is a win. And maybe, 2 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, they'll be in a place where they can look at their vaping or cannabis use. Or maybe not. But you just meet them to where they're at and just, have conversations. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, lovely, thank you. So we have some new quitting resources for vaping, which I'm really excited about. This one is an American one, but when the youth go to it, it asks questions like, is this affecting your life? How is this affecting your life? Where is your money going? And it helps youth to assess whether or not vaping is having a negative impact. It's based on the stages of change. And if At the end of the questions, if you say that they'd like to make some changes, it will direct them to a quit plan. And if they say, no, I'm not ready to make changes, it'll give them other advice and say, hey, come back later. So it's a great resource. And these slides, by the way, will be on the Public Board's website for you. We also have a Canadian one. This one was designed through a bunch of health units in Ontario. It's called Not an Experiment. There's a section for parents, which is great, as well as for educators. Right here, what I'm showing you, this is where youth can make their own quit plan, and they can download it and personalize it. Okay, next one, please. It asks things like, who is a support to you? What do you want as a reward? What are some of the triggers for you? And it just helps them think through how they can be successful. And this is based on what we learned from tobacco. It's the same idea about quit plans. Okay, next slide, please. We also have some new apps that are available. And these two apps, these were developed by Toronto School of Public Health, and they've been approved by the Ontario Tobacco Research Unit and the health units throughout Ontario. They were co-created by youth vapers. And so they allow youth to upload pictures, upload videos of their quit attempts, share them with friends, create that personalized plan. So they're making great use of technology. Next one. Oops. These are some more apps and a website, and next one. So if you could, this is just a video that explains one of the apps. This app was developed by the Lung Federation of Canada and is funded by Health Canada.
So you're doing this. You're ready to quit. You're committed. Awesome. But now what? Where do I even start? Are there tricks? How do I fight cravings? What happens if I get stressed? How do I quit? Well, the truth is, so many teens just like you are wondering the same thing. And we know that, so we created Watch. Because quitting isn't a one-size-fits-all experience. It's about becoming smoke or vape-free in a way that works for you. Use tools that will keep you motivated. That's what Watch is all about. It's about taking control, setting realistic goals, and living your life smoke or vape-free. It's about watching your cravings, checking when you need to, log your cravings whenever they creep up, track how intense they are, how you are feeling, and what situation you're in. It's about seeing how far you've come, seeing your longest quit streak, how much money you've saved to boost and energize it. It's about understanding what you need, recognizing patterns and finding ways around it, and ultimately making healthier choices. We know you can do this. We know you want this. We want you to succeed, and we're so ready to do it with you. So let's do it. Time to get crushed.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And these apps are all free. This is a website that came out of COVID through Health Canada with Homewood Health, with Bell, all kinds of organizations, as a result of the fact that we saw an increase in mental health concerns and substance use because of the pandemic. So it's a fantastic website for adults and for youth. And on this website, you can find links to these two online platforms. So as I said before, peers are really powerful. And this is a place where youth can anonymously but safely post their comments, get support, cheer one another on from peers across Canada. There's no cost to it, and it has very good regulators. They've got online safety, they have professionally trained moderators. The one on the top is through Kids Help Phone, and again, like the apps, co-created by youth for youth. So that's another option. Next one. And this is just to highlight that youth can vape cannabis, for sure. Generally, you need special pens to vape cannabis, and it can vape either the flower or it can vape the oil. They tend not to be able to use those vapes that I showed you down there to vape cannabis, but just so you're aware. Okay, I'm now going to turn the time over to Caroline.
Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Ruth. I'm a little short, so I'm just going to pull over a block to stand on. Okay, perfect. So we're going to move over to cannabis edibles. And I realized when we use the term cannabis, it is a very professional word. You'll hear a lot more youth out there use the terms marijuana, weed, grass, pot. There's a lot of ways to say it. And marijuana as a substance, it's not new. It's been around for quite some time. But the concerning thing that we have with it is that the marijuana we have out there today is a lot more potent. It's a lot more stronger in terms of concentration than what we saw maybe in the 70s and the 80s. The THC that is grown, especially illegally, is a lot more stronger than was out there. And Ruth had kindly found a lot of these photos here on the slides. If you pay attention to the next several set of slides, these are real examples of illegal edibles that you'll find online. And if you pay attention to how many milligrams of THC, it's quite a lot. So when you go in the Ontario Cannabis Store, the maximum concentration of THC would be only 10 milligrams. And THC, I should also mention, that is the substance that actually makes you high with cannabis, okay? So if you look at this illegal this illegal example of edibles with the stoner patch gummies or dummies here, there's 500 milligrams of THC. So that's a huge amount by comparison. And with illegal edibles, the other concern that there is that there's absolutely no limit with how much THC that can be in the products. So we have another question if we want to use Mentimeter or if you want to just go old school and raise your hand. It's just asking why youth choose to use edibles. So I'll give us a few moments here. I did not see that they're up on the board. I have a hard time reading this. Okay. Okay. Okay, great. So we have 3 examples here: peer pressure, coping, experimentation. Yeah, those are all great answers. We'll go into the next slide. Yeah, so there could be many, many reasons with edibles. You might not like the taste or the smell of cannabis when it's smoked. A lot of curiosity, what Ruth was talking about with peer pressure in friend groups. The friend group, they might all be using, so you might be more enticed to use it as well. Edibles are a lot more discreet. They're a lot more sneaky. As you see here in the photo again with the illegal edibles, they look exactly like candy. You can take it, an edible, you can throw away the packaging. Nobody will very likely find out that you're taking it. It's very easy to hide. Otherwise, some people might want to choose edibles just to avoid the health risks of smoking or vaping marijuana. It might not go, it doesn't go through your lung system. And otherwise, family and friends are also using them as well. So just another question here. I'll pay attention to the board. What are some risks of using edibles? So we have unknown THC level, not knowing how much is in the package, overdose, unknown dose, yeah. Some topics that we've already touched on before. I'm just going to jump over to our next slide. And delayed response, yeah. Exactly. So definitely risks with using edibles, similar to what we already touched on the previous slide. When somebody doesn't take edibles very often, they might, let's say, take an edible, they might not feel anything, and then they take another and another and another, and they're gonna start to feel really, really sick, or it's called greening out. So with edibles, with cannabis edibles, it takes about 30 minutes to 2 hours to feel the full high effect with edibles. So that's why when people are uncertain when they're using, they're gonna take a lot more than they typically might think that they need to, and that will make them feel very sick. Next slide. Great, and another question here. So similar to the last one, but now we're just asking what are the risks of using illegal edibles? Got an answer there? Oh, can't tell how much cannabis is in it. Unknown THC. Yeah. Perfect. I think I will jump us over to the next slide. Great. So again, similar to what we've already discussed, with illegal edibles, there's no limit to how much THC is in here. In the photo that's on the slide that Ruth had found, this example, I believe, had 1,000 milligrams of THC. So again, when we compare that to the 10 milligrams that you can buy legally on the Ontario Cannabis Store, it's a huge, drastic amount of a difference. Some other concerns that we have, the package might not be evenly distributed. So in this gummy, we can say one half of the gummy might have a very low amount of THC, whereas the other half of the gummy might have all the THC. The distribution might not be even. It's untested, it's unregulated, it can be contaminated with other harmful chemicals like fentanyl, for example, that has been seen before, and it's often purchased from illegal websites and social sources. Next slide. Great, so we kind of have a little trick question here to see if people have been paying attention. So how do we know this package is illegal? I might have to go back to see the photo one more time. There we go. Okay. Maybe we'll give it a good 10 seconds. Okay. Yeah, it contains more than 10 milligrams of THC. Great, we'll go to the next slide. We'll kind of walk through how we know this is an illegal edible product. So again, the packaging, it does appeal to youth. So I don't think I mentioned that earlier, but with legal edible products, they have to have plain packaging. Anything that you find on the Ontario Cannabis Store would not look like this. This package, it contains 500 milligrams of THC when we know that the legal amount only is 10. It doesn't have a health warning on it, and it doesn't have the approved symbol of the cannabis leaf. So again, with the marketing strategy that's made here, you can really see that it is illegal. You can see what it does when it's marketed towards youth. I mean, I don't think these are really marketed as much to adults. It's very clear, it's for younger people. You know, it's a cereal brand. Yep. Next slide. And another question here. This is kind of a little tricky, fun one. So which bag of chips contains cannabis? So we have the top photo or the bottom, so you can take a vote of what you think. And I know a lot of people think when they think of marijuana, you know, and edibles, they typically think sweets, things like brownies and cookies and chocolates. But you can see it as well in savory products and in drinks. Okay, I think right away we're saying top bag. I'll give it another second. I think that's what we're locking in. Okay, top bag it is. Next slide. Perfect, so you are correct. Whoever voted top bag, that is right. So the top bag is the illegal edible product and the bottom bag is just a regular bag of Ruffles. But really, to the eye, when you're not looking at it that closely, it's very hard to miss. If you saw this on your counter, you might not notice it right away. It's just, again, very sneaky with the marketing that's out there for illegal products. If you do look really closely though on the top bag, there is kind of a hidden marijuana leaf on the top left corner there. It does have that resealable bag that you normally wouldn't find on regular Ruffle chips. What else is there? I think, kind of squinting here, it's hard to see, but I think it was 500 milligrams or 600 milligrams of THC. So we know that those are some signs that is an illegal edible product. Next slide. And then here in the panel of photos, we just have good examples of legal versus illegal products. So the photos on the top panel, those are our illegal cannabis or illegal marijuana products. Again, you can see it's clearly marketed towards young people. It's all candy products or cereal products. The THC, I think, is it's definitely over 10 for sure. I think it's about 500 milligrams of THC. And if you look at the cost, it is not expensive, right, of how much you get in the product. So that's obviously a concern. The bottom panel of photos, those are edible products that you would find on the Ontario Cannabis Store. So again, very plain packaging, only 10 milligrams of THC, so that is considered legal. Next slide. Great, and another question with Mentimeter, so just asking, what are some signs of over-intoxication? So just taking too much cannabis, which is also called greening out. And that's okay if you're not sure, because we'll answer it on the next slide. Okay. Next slide it is. So for taking too much cannabis or greening out or over-intoxication, there's many names for it, but there's many feelings that one may have, and one person may not feel the same way as another. So you can have feelings of dizziness, drowsiness, feeling lightheadedness or tiredness, disorientation, confusion, feeling drunk, feeling too high, headaches, feeling an extreme slowing of time, suspiciousness, nervousness, anxiety that might feel like a panic attack, psychosis, loss of body control. Next slide. And just this slide here, so this is a campaign that the region of Waterloo worked on, I believe, this past fall. So just if choosing to use, know the risks. If you do choose to have edible products in your home, we do encourage people to lock it up safely, especially from young children and from pets. Next slide. Great. And then this slide, just what youth need to know about cannabis. So this is kind of a nice summary slide here. This is more of our prevention messaging. Bottom line, the best way to avoid any kind of risks with cannabis or marijuana is just not to use. Just to be aware of the risks, to delay use as long as possible. Our recommendation, if you are going to use cannabis, is to wait at least to the age of 25 or older, and that's because your brain is still developing. And cannabis or marijuana, it can harm brain development. There is also a higher risk of mental health problems if you use a lot of cannabis or marijuana, especially if you have schizophrenia in your family history. If you use a lot of marijuana, it could trigger that. Of course, there are safety risks involved. And if somebody ever does consider using marijuana to deal with stress, anxiety, depression, sleep, or pain, before resulting to that and self-medicating yourself, please talk to your family doctor or healthcare practitioner before you choose to use on your own. Next slide. Great, and then this slide is more of our harm reduction messaging. So similar to what Ruth was talking about with vaping, sometimes youth and young people will use out of curiosity and many reasons like we talked about before, but at least if they are going to use, try to use it safely. So some messaging that we have here about safety is choosing products with low THC. Again, that's that substance that makes you high, so lower THC, 10 milligrams or lower. starting low and going slow, just because you don't know how the product is going to affect you. Avoid combining substances, so we do not recommend drinking alcohol and using marijuana at the same time. Avoid using it daily. Use it in a safe space, so at home, for example. Avoid artificial cannabis. So artificial cannabis, because we know marijuana is a plant, but artificial cannabis can be grown, I guess the easiest way to describe it would be human-made THC. And of course, don't drive, don't go to work, don't go to school high, and avoid hotboxing. So hotboxing is if you were to smoke a lot of marijuana, or even could be tobacco, you're sitting in a car with all the windows rolled up, and there's a lot of smoke in that car, and there's nowhere for the smoke to go because there's no air ventilation. So that's hotboxing. Next slide. We do have also some cannabis quit resources, so I'll walk them through quickly here. So Ray of Hope Youth Addiction Services, it is a local resource in KW. So they do provide youth support services, individual counseling, family meetings, day treatments, as well as treatments throughout the summer. Some of the programs are free and some of them do come to a cost. I did give them a call at the end of March and they did say that right now they are not full, but that can change at any point in time. Connex Ontario and Breaking Free, the wellness app. So these are both online resources. They provide information for people experiencing substance use problems and provide services for supports. Next slide. Great, so this is what the Breaking Free Wellness app looks like for the platform. So we have different topics here. It covers strengthening your own personal wellness, anticipating or understanding your difficult situations, learning to manage your impulses, and doing positive activities that make you feel good. So finding other ways to cope other than resorting to substances. Next slide. Oh, we're already here. And the Mind Your Mind website, this is also a great one, has great activities and resources online. Next slide. Perfect. Just quickly jumping into some vaping trends and then Gwen will take over. I do realize that these trends are a little older. They're from 2018 to 2019. We don't have the greatest statistics because of COVID. So do keep in mind when we're reading off the numbers here, they are probably higher at this point in time. So if we're looking at vaping trends, it's not a shock that more high school students would be vaping than elementary school students. And among those vaping students, about 40% vaped daily or near daily, and almost 100%, so 90%, used a product with nicotine, which again, probably isn't a shocker. Next slide. Great, about 54% thought it would be fairly easy or very easy to get a vape with nicotine. So again, just showing how easy it is or how easy it can be for them to get vaping products. Next slide. Jumping over to cannabis, again, same thing. More high school students say they use than elementary school students. And among those that do use cannabis, about 76% of them have or do smoke it, and about 45% of them use edible products. So that's the second most popular way to use. Next slide. Just going again about cannabis, about 40% thought it would be fairly easy or very easy to get cannabis or marijuana products. Next slide. And just a quick slide here about vaping and cannabis trends during the COVID-19 pandemic. These were two different studies that were completed in Canada. So talking about vaping, and these ask two different questions, that's why they're set up a little differently. But for vaping, 13% of youth aged 15 to 19 reported having vaped at least once during a 30-day period. Vaping to reduce stress increased during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was the number one reason for use. For cannabis, about 46% of those aged 16 to 19 reported using more cannabis. So again, those are people that are already using. They reported using more. And the most common reasons for increased cannabis use were boredom, stress, anxiety, lack of a regular schedule, and loneliness. So similar to vaping trends. Next slide. I think Gwen is covering this portion.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to actually start with our very first question here. So what works when talking with our youth about cannabis and vaping? So we'll give a few minutes or maybe 10 seconds. Yeah. Okay, so before I start, I just want to preface and say that I'm not a parenting expert, and I don't claim to be one. In fact, I think parents are the expert of their own children. You know your children the best. The pieces that I will be chatting about and talking about tonight are things that you have done or continue to do. Hopefully some of the things that I mentioned would be things that you might consider also doing. So what works when we're talking with our youth about substances? Okay. Staying connected. That sounds fairly easy. But as our teens get older and they are learning more about themselves, there's lots of independence, they tend to sway away. We know that, friends are probably the number one people in their lives. Social media plays such a tremendous piece for youth now. So knowing and staying connected to your child. Know where your child's going. Know if they're changing phone numbers. Generally, you are probably paying for their cell phone, so have that information. So the connection is also making sure that you do spend that time with your youth as well. So if your youth is interested in certain sports, be present, show up, and engage in some of those conversation with them. One of the most important things that we always talk about is staying connected. Even if you and your youth are going through a tough patch, stay connected. That is really crucial for kids. And talk. Having those conversations, there's open dialogue about what's happening, what's going on. You don't need to, go into the room and rip things apart if you're really concerned about stuff. It's really about those conversations, those everyday conversations with your youth. And being informed. So you're here tonight. Clearly you want to know more about cannabis and vaping and all of the trends that are happening. Knowing what's going on is really crucial, because information changes daily, and new products pop up on a regular basis. I'm just, I've seen this presentation before from Ruth and Caroline, and I have to tell you, it shocks me. Every time I see the Ruffled chips, I go home to my spouse and I'll say to him, our kids will not be eating any chips at school without us actually checking it out first. But that's the mom instinct, right? That's the parent instinct of wanting to make sure that your kiddo is safe, and that's a natural instinct. And being supportive. And that means helping your youth around coping strategies, coping mechanism. What are they using? If they are saying to you, you know what, Mom and Dad, I'm smoking up because it really helps with my stress. I hear that a lot as a clinician. Okay. But what are other strategies that you can use as well? I often talk about this thing called a toolbox, and I like to call it a toolbox of care. And I always believe that starts when kids are quite young. And what does that look like? It looks like building up certain strategies for them when things are stressful, when anxiety happens, because that's always going to happen. So what kinds of things have they learned away to sort of tuck into that toolbox? Because they're going to use it, whether they are 5 or whether they're 16. It's just building upon that toolbox. And all of us in this room actually have a toolbox. We may not actually name it, we may not know it, but we know how to cope sometimes when we have stress, right? We know that maybe we'll go for a run, maybe it's exercise. So there are things that we have built in over time that has helped us cope. So part of talking to your youth is also helping them build their strategies and into that toolbox. And be an example. So I know this question was posed at our last presentation around, should I be honest about my own use of cannabis and vaping a few years ago? That was one question that was posed by a parent. And we would say yes. So it is a conversation starter. It's always best to be honest with your youth, because then you can dive into other conversations as well. It doesn't have to all be focused on what mom and dad was experimenting in, but that's it could be an open conversation starter for you and your youth. And showing interest. So what we mean by that is just ask really genuine questions. And oftentimes I think when our kids come home and you ask them how is today, and they often say, yeah, it's fine, and they head up to their room, or maybe they're just going to pick up something from the fridge and they leave. So those are opportunities to stop and maybe engage a little bit more about how their day, what their day looks like, and maybe change up. Maybe not ask them how was your day. Maybe it's something else that might be of interest for them. Maybe it's, did you see the game last night, right? So it's maybe changing up some of those conversation starters. Okay. Adopting a non-judgmental attitude. So talking about cannabis and vaping can be a challenge. And I think that, as parents, I always call it sort of like the mama bear effect, when you know that this is present, this is out there, and kids are surrounded by it. How do you even approach your child with this? And it is really being as objective as you possibly can, and just keep those conversations open. It's when we get really scared and we close off those conversations, that then there's nothing. Then there's not that ability to engage with your child. And I think one thing that I want to also remind parents is that kids do not want to disappoint their parents. You might have a very vicious fight with your kiddo, but at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you in my experience of 20 years as a clinician working with kids, they never want to disappoint their parents. And in fact, they do want to make their parents proud. So keep those conversations open, continue with that dialogue. And these conversations don't need to happen overnight. It could start today if you haven't had those conversations, or maybe you've had this conversation maybe a year ago. Continue on with these conversations as you learn new things, as you're being informed of maybe new studies that are coming out or new products that are coming out. Continue with that dialogue. When you sit down and you decide, I'm just going to talk about cannabis and vaping in just one night, it's not going to have an impact. It is that continual conversation. And when you are having these conversations, it's okay to even write down what you would like to, look at addressing with your kids. You don't have to feel like, I'm just going to wing it. You can actually just take that time and think about what are some of the things you would like to talk to your child about, and think that through. Sometimes when I have hard conversations with my kids, I actually write down things that I'm thinking of also trying to address so that I don't forget. Being positive, calm, and relaxed. So, like I said, it's a natural instinct for us to want to save our child or want to protect our child. But kids can read us. They can read our body language from a mile away. So when you are having these conversations, that's important to note, is that kids are going to watch for your reaction, right? They're going to, if they feel that they're in a safe space, to make a disclosure to you. So it could be that, I did try some pot, a few weeks ago when I was at a friend's house. They're going to look for your reaction, right? And if they know that, you know what, they can make that disclosure to you and that there's not going to be an overreaction or an underreaction, that there's a nice fine balance there, then that conversation can continue. Then you can deep dive a little bit further with your child. And finding a comfortable space is really important as well. And it could be sitting down, you know, on the couch. If your child's sitting down, sit down with them. Having a conversation about cannabis and vaping and confronting them when Aunt Judy is coming over for dinner is probably not the best time to do it. So sort of read the room and read what your child is exhibiting to you. So if your child is just really relaxed and just sitting, maybe that's what you do as well. Next. Okay, and asking them what they know. You'll be surprised that some of them will tell you quite a bit. There might be even a full disclosure of all the things that they know because of the exposure. Instagram, TikTok, all the social media, it's all on there. And you know what? They're around different peer groups as well. They may not experiment with it, but they may have seen it. So when you start opening that conversation about what they know, then you can also inform your child about things that you've learned. You know, the level of THC in a product, what does that mean? How harmful could it be? So that really opens up a dialogue. And then helping them make more informed decisions, more healthy decisions. So is it, you know, looking at, again, a different coping mechanism if they're really struggling with something? Is it looking at, you know, if your child is, say, engaged in substance use and they're also maybe, you know, a high performer in hockey, for example, maybe they need to also hear that, you know, that's going to have a huge impact on your ability to play sports, right? So sometimes it's good to also connect it with things that are actually quite meaningful to them. And we know for some kids it could be sports, some kid it could be, you know, playing an instrument, for example. So looking at what is important to them. Next. Okay. Body language, and that goes sort of hand in hand with just, you know, where you're having these conversations with your child. You will know your child the best. You are the expert of your child. And like I said, your child will read your body language too. And so even just the tone of your voice could make a difference as well. And it's all about providing that safe space for kids to feel like they can have those conversations, that they can make a disclosure without feeling that they're going to get into a lot of trouble. I think at the end of the day, again, as I said before, kids do not want to disappoint their parents. And it's okay to ask them permission to have this conversation. Sometimes parents feel like maybe I'm just going to go in and just ask, just talk, and without asking that permission. But I think when you ask permission, then it also shows, you know, a level of respect around, I want to hear what you have to say as well. And the empathy and the compassion, which all you folks know, because that's what kids need when they're making any disclosure. There's a vulnerability that is attached when kids are talking about something that they know is going to be disappointing or something that is hard for them, or perhaps they are addicted. Perhaps they are needing the substance on a daily basis. It takes a lot of vulnerability to actually be truthful about what's going on. And the reality is that not all these conversations are going to go well. There's going to be some conversations that are going to be great, and then other conversations where maybe your child gets up and leaves or, you know, slams the door. And that's okay. It's not a reflection of you as a parent when those situations happen, because when we talk about substance, it's hard. It is hard, especially when children are already engaging in it, or they're thinking about it, or they're relying on the product. it's okay to take some space and to come back and reframe those conversations. Another thing to also think about is maybe have a more of, a plan with your youth around what are you going to do if you go to the party? If you know they're heading off to a party and there's going to be at least 50 to 100 kids, is there a plan? I know for my kiddo, I know when he heads out to a party, we often have a plan where I say to him, you're going to call or you're going to text, and it's a very quick word that he's going to use, and I know that, no questions asked, I'm going to come and pick you up. So is it that plan, right? How a plan around how does your child sort of get out of a situation? If they're being offered cannabis, or people are smoking up in that space, how do they get themselves out of there without losing face, without feeling embarrassed? And also, talk to them about peer pressure. I know you're doing that already, but maybe it is talking about different scenarios. What kinds of things can they say? What kinds of words can they say to get themselves out of a situation that they don't want to be part of, right? Things that you have done before. But sometimes kids at this stage may need that reminder. And another piece is connection. I can't stress enough about connection because they are really strong protective factors when your kids are connected. And that could be with other adults. So it could be family members, could be a coach, it could be your neighbor, for example. So making sure that those connections also happen. There's connection at home, but actually move that connection out. So making sure that their circle of support is available. So that could look different for every child. And we know that when kids are connected, they may not maybe disclose to you as parents, but they may actually go to Uncle John, or they may go to their coach and have this conversation. So there's a real importance around ensuring that our kids have other connections as well. Okay. Sorry, I can't see that. All right. And the question up here is, what can youth do to cope positively with everyday stressors? So we'll give it about 10 seconds there. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so go for a walk or leave the room. Oh, breathe. Talk to someone. Is that? Sports, yeah. So all good things. Next slide. So we know that for youth to also learn to identify their emotions. And what do we mean by that? You would be surprised that there are some youth that may not know all of their emotions. Emotions, we talk a lot about emotional or social emotional when they're quite young. But building upon that, because when kids are stressed, it actually shows up in their body first. So I don't know if you've noticed, even as adults, when you're stressed out or you've got a bit of anxiety going, it starts to show. Your body always tells you when you're stressed out. And it could be your stomach is turning, you could get really nervous. Same thing with kids. And it's okay for kids to have big emotions, and it's okay for them to sit with those emotions. I think sometimes we want to help solve it right away for our kids, but actually it's okay. If they're feeling sad, it's okay for them to sit in that. Much like, when they're really happy, we celebrate that as well. So giving them that permission to really express that. Connecting with friends, playing sports, as I've mentioned before, are all really good things. And the piece around sleep is so tremendously important. I know as parents, you know that. But we know that kids, especially teens, are not getting the amount of sleep that they need to rejuvenate. When we talk about, really recharging our batteries, that's absolutely a big part of having good coping strategies. And going back to building that toolbox. So is it really good sleep hygiene that you focus on with your kiddo? Is it also looking at, can you feel what, if you're having anxiety, what does that look like in your body? Do they identify that? And if you're starting to feel this way, what are 3 things that you can do to help alleviate that? So start planning that with your kids. Okay, so that concludes my portion. And as Ruth had mentioned before, that you folks being here is one of the, the biggest piece for kids because you're being informed. And tonight, no matter where things are sitting at with your youth, all of what you've learned tonight can be scary. But again, it's not a reflection of who you are as parents. You just being here tonight shows that you want to know, you want to learn, and you want to keep your kids safe. Thank you.
So on behalf of Safe and Healthy Schools, Heather Berry and I would like to thank you, first of all, our presenters for coming today. We are going to offer in-person Q&A in a few moments after we log off the live stream, but we want to express a few thank yous first.
So thank you so much to Ruth, Caroline, and Gwen for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us this evening, and please feel free to ask questions to Ruth, Gwen, and Caroline. I know that we've all benefited so much from the information this evening and the resources and links that will be again posted on the WRDSB website, so you can the slideshow that you've seen tonight will be available to you. We also want to thank you so much, Brenda Cathcart, the principal here at Jacob Hespeler Secondary School, for offering the space. And those of you who also connected with us in the live stream, thank you so much for being here tonight.
We want to express thanks to our communications and ITS team members. We want to thank Mike Delisle for his role in setting us up with projector, and Mike, and also our lighting person. Thanks to Estefania Brandenstein, our board communications team lead, for your part in giving publicity to this event, and also our appreciation to Ben Yaklik, our board communication team member, for providing us with the live stream this evening. This is allowing you as virtual members to join us in our community for this presentation. Finally, thanks to you, the parental and caregivers and community members that are joining us virtually as well as in person here in the Jacob Hespeler Auditorium. The fact that you took time, and Gwen already mentioned this, out of your busy schedules to come and learn more about vaping and cannabis show that you do deeply care about the youth in your lives and the concern you have for their physical health as well as their mental health. We thank you for that connection, and we wish you a good night. So for those that do want to ask and have questions, you can ask them now. The panel is here. We just wanted to sign off from our live stream first. And so